I'm Donna Nelson, and I have with me Dr. Sharon Lewis, Professor of Chemistry at Langston University. And we're here today on the soundstage of Gray Fredrickson at Oklahoma City Community College. And Sharon's going to tell us some about her life and the things that she's experienced on her way to becoming a professor of chemistry. And I just want to tell you, I'm so grateful that you were able to come here today. I appreciate it so much.
Dr. Donna Nelson, thank you for the invite. I consider this a privilege.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. So we may as well start at the beginning, I guess. Could you tell us some about your life and your background and what it is that led you to become a scientist?
Okay, I was born in Philadelphia, and I attended Howard University, which is in Washington, D.C. It's a historically black university and college, and it was a positive experience. But as a student in D.C., I walked a lot, and so a lot of exercise. Howard was a positive environment. I was a zoology major, chemistry minor, had excellent teachers. I was inspired by my uncle Wayne Miles, who is a chemist. He got his PhD from Temple University, and I watched him work so hard on that and not give up. And so when he became on faculty at Howard, it was a thrill. And he's an analytical chemist, and I'm a biochemist. Got my PhD from the University of Oklahoma. In between Howard and getting my PhD, the Army paid for my college. So I was in ROTC while at Howard University. And so I owed the Army 4 years active duty, and it was all at Fort Sill, which is in Lawton, Oklahoma. And then I got out of the military. By then I had had both my children. And so I was looking for a chemistry job or, zoology job or some sort of job like that. And so I applied quite a bit around the Lawton area, but then I started looking at the jobs in Oklahoma City. And there was a Kerr-McGee Technology Center, and I applied, and they hired me as a technician. The Kerr-McGee Technology Center had about 100 PhD scientists, but only 3 female engineers. And I stayed at Kerr-McGee for 22 months. While I was there, 2 of the 3 female engineers really harassed me and told me, they harassed me. They said, Sharon, you need to go to graduate school. Okay, and so I applied to the University of Oklahoma, got accepted into the chemistry department, and I chose chemistry because we're in Oklahoma and it's oil and gas country.
Yes.
So I really didn't think that biology was a good fit. So, and my minor at Howard was chemistry, and I enjoyed it. And so I attended University of Oklahoma chemistry department, and my mentor was Dr. Bruce Rowe.
Great. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so now, just to be certain, it may be unbelievable, but some people don't know what an HBCU is.
A historically black university and college, Howard University, and I think there's like over 100 across the country. The one that's furthest west is Langston University, where I presently work. It's primarily a minority university. And right now we are we are really trying to get more Latinos and Asians and more minorities to attend Langston University.
Diversifying a little.
We are, yes, we are, yes.
And Langston is Oklahoma's only HBCU, isn't it?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And always has been, hasn't it?
Yes, in the town of Langston. And so there's some historically black towns across Oklahoma, but Langston University it's a very small town. But I understand, like 60 or 70 years ago, it was a progressive town. I mean, a lot of black businesses and everything. And so the administration is really working hard to try to bring businesses back to Langston University.
That's
Langston
fantastic.
area.
That's
Yes.
great. Okay. And now your uncle, who you said...
Dr. Wayne Miles.
An analytical chemist. And so when he came on board the faculty at Howard University, and you were still there
Yes.
as a student, and so what was that like, having your uncle in the faculty where you were taking some courses?
It was very interesting. It was fun. He actually had me do research in his lab.
Great.
So I was an MBRS student, Minority Biomedical Research Scholar student. And so I worked in his lab, and he basically had me do menial tasks in his lab in order to prepare the laboratory for his teaching.
Yeah, but any experience is beneficial.
It was very beneficial, and it was wonderful just seeing family every day.
Oh, yeah.
And then he would allow me to just come spend the weekends in his apartment, and so it was just wonderful. He made being at Howard a wonderful experience.
That's great.
Now, once I graduated, he then took a job at Agilent Technologies.
Oh.
And so that's where he's been for the last 20 to 25 years. Yes.
Did you sit in on any of his classes or take any of his classes?
I didn't take any of his classes, but right now there's an orthopedic surgeon in Lawton, Oklahoma, who my uncle taught. And so we were just talking. The orthopedic surgeon's name is Dr. Wayne Johnson. And we were just talking about the faculty at at Howard. And he said, oh, there was this guy named Wayne Miles. And I said, hold up, he's my uncle. And he's like, really?
That's great.
And so I told Uncle Wayne, I said, one of your students is an orthopedic surgeon, a very successful one. And so it would be wonderful for those two to meet. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And so then you went on and went to graduate school. So when you applied to graduate schools, was OU the only one that you applied to?
Also applied to the OU Health Science Center, but it was more going to be biological. And so I really wanted the acceptance at the Norman campus in the chemistry department. Yes.
Well, that's good. That's always good to get what you want the most.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
And so was that a difficult transition for you, going back to school or, after being out for a while?
It was an interesting transition. It was a positive experience because I had these women at Kerr McGee rooting for me, okay?
That's great.
And then I had this wonderful severance package from Kerr McGee Technology Center, which was very interesting. And I was brought in as a teaching assistant at OU. Okay, so I had classwork and then teaching assistant and then working in a lab. Okay, now I was commuting from Lawton to Norman.
Oh
yes,
my God.
It was an hour and 15 minutes commute.
That's about 70 miles, isn't it?
Yes, but it gave me enough time to get organized. So it's like, okay, I'm leaving work, and what all do I need to do at home? Okay, the kids have my daughter had cheerleading. My son had football or baseball or something. So, I was always on a schedule. And it, was kind of fun because my life was being fulfilled, but they were progressing also.
That's wonderful.
Yes, it was a positive experience.
That's great.
Yes.
And so you were a TA. Now, at this time, what year was that you entered graduate school?
1994.
Okay. And during that time period, there still weren't a great number of black graduate students in chemistry.
Correct. When I started in 1994, that August, there was one guy, okay, and he ended up just staying for his master's. He worked in the lab of Dr. Victor Otto, and then he went to Dallas to accept a job, okay, and so it was just him and I. And I noticed that throughout my stay at OU, like you would see a student for a semester, and then you wouldn't see him anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So, that first semester kind of took him out.
I remember that. I remember the same thing happening to women in the women graduate students when I was a graduate student at UT Austin, and they just sort of disappeared.
Yes.
And you didn't know where they went or why they left. It's sort of creepy, at least I thought.
Yeah, that's the exact word.
So did you feel that you were a role model for students, undergraduates, who you were a teaching assistant for, or others?
I think I was a role model for my children because they saw me studying, and I would do their homework with them, and then I stayed up to do my own homework.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I know I had a positive impact on my children. During the summers, my children would come to all of the camps that OU had. Okay, cheerleading camp, football camp, every camp. And so then once they were done with camp, I would bring them into the lab and they would get on the computers. So my son today is, in May, he graduated as an MIS major from OU, and he works in computer science.
That's great.
At ConocoPhillips in Bartlesville.
Wow.
Yeah. He was just so taken by the computers. He would just sit there and he was like only about maybe 6 or 7. Okay. My daughter, she would just kind of wander through the lab, with me. And so that was interesting. Right now, she's still in her senior year at OU, and she's an accounting major. But right this second, she's in New York at Morgan Stanley, working in accounting as a summer internship.
Great.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Now, as far as me being a role model to the students that I taught, I believe
undergraduates.
So. The undergraduates. I do believe so, because there were the students, I had 30 at a time, okay? 2 sets of 30.
Right.
And there weren't many minority students, but I think the fact that I had discipline, I think that motivated them, okay? And I noticed that while I was in the row lab, I also had to train other students who actually, about 3 or 4 students, worked on my project with me and got their senior thesis completed working on my project. And so I know I was totally
That's wonderful.
a mentor for them and I motivated them.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
wonderful. But whether they're actually enrolled with you or not, just to know that you exist would be
Yes.
important for a lot of undergraduates. I mean,
Yes.
just to see you walking down the halls and knowing that you're there.
Yes.
Sometimes that can be very important also.
One of the things that was totally motivational, there were 2 other ladies that were working on their PhDs in organic chemistry. And we would just see each other and we would kind of just commune together. And it was just kind of funny. And I'd come out of just doing a seminar, and you do seminars and you know that you've got 8 faculty members who know more than you
Yes.
know. Okay. And so, it may be an area of their research and you're doing a seminar, and, those 2 young ladies, they would say, okay, was this a win-win or a lose-lose? And it was kind of funny. This is a lose-lose. Okay. So, but it was fun because
Yeah.
the seminars gave you an opportunity to look at other research other than what your study was. Okay. And so, you got to branch out and just take a mental break and just, learn more. And so the learning curve was interesting because of the diversity.
That's great. And so, what was your experience like, your general overall experience in graduate school? How many years did it take you to get your PhD, and were there any special experiences that...
My overall experience in graduate school was a negative experience. And I really hope that the people who are viewing this video do not get discouraged. But this is a reality check. Graduate school is very demanding. You are teaching, you are doing research, you are then also mentoring undergraduate students on your research project. And initially we started off with the human genome. So Dr. Bruce Rowe's lab was committed to certain parts of the human genome, chromosome 22. And that was a wonderful experience because it was highly driven. We had timelines, deadlines. And so, once that project was near completion, we were all energized. Because we knew this is the human genome and this is a big deal.
Very important.
Okay.
I remember.
And so, and then while we were working on that project, machinery was being developed. So sequencers, better sequencers, faster sequencers were being developed. Okay, so you enjoyed that. Then at the same time, the computer work was being developed. Okay, so when the project initially started in 1990, they didn't, well, of course they expected to receive a whole bunch of data, but the question is, well, how are we going to analyze this data? Okay.
Right.
And so I get there in 1994, and you're dealing with computer scientists who are still trying to figure out, how do I annotate a genome? Okay. How do I annotate a plasmid? Forget about a genome. How do I annotate a plasmid? And so, I mean, you saw the progress being made daily as far as computer analysis and generation of a huge amount of data. Okay. And then working out protocol in order to, get to the point where you've got let's see, materials that can be sequenced in these sequencers. Okay, DNA to be sequenced, isolated DNA to be sequenced in these sequencers.
Okay.
And so everything was just totally driven day by day. Something was changing. And so you may have put a protocol on the website and you needed to take it off because that did not work correctly.
Oh.
Okay, so that was kind of interesting. Now, I say it was a negative experience. That was the positive side. I say it was a negative experience because initially I was working on the human genome. That was wonderful. Then I was working with some other undergraduate students in the lab working on their projects. Okay. And, a couple of times my name didn't go on the papers. And so that was kind of interesting.
That can be very discouraging.
My name did get on the paper for the human genome, but I noticed that it didn't get on the paper for some other people's research. Okay, but you just keep going. Okay. All right. So then it took about a year for my major professor, Dr. Bruce Rowe, to decide on my dissertation project. About 3 or 4 people had told him, I don't want to be bothered with this project. I don't want to be involved in this project because this is a lengthy project.
Wow.
Okay. And in my zest to go ahead on and start and get into a dissertation project, I was like, okay, bring it on. I'm ready for this project. Well, so initially the project, I was told, oh, you're just going to analyze or isolate or sequence a couple of proteins, and you're then going to annotate those proteins. Okay, that was like about 10. I was given the number 10. Okay, well then I continued doing the work, and I said to myself, okay, I should be at the point that I can annotate those 10 proteins. And so then he said, no, you need to do a little bit more work. So I did a little bit more work, about 6 months more work. And so I generated quite a bit of data, okay? And so then about a year later, at this point, I'm starting to write my introduction. I'm starting to work on the dissertation.
Yes.
I'm writing the introduction. I'm keeping meticulous notes on materials and methods, okay? And, I've not quite gotten to the point where it's time to analyze the data, but I'm realizing that I've collected a lot of data.
Yes.
Okay, at this point, he tells me, you are to sequence the entire bacterial genome. Well, there were other projects in the lab where people were just sequencing plasmids, okay? People were sequencing BACs, which are, very small. I'm told that I am to sequence a bacterial genome.
So this was an unexpected increase in the size of your assignment.
Large, huge increase, because at this point, I don't know how large this bacterial genome is. And I looked at the other projects that were in the lab, and I'm noticing that I've generated more data at that point than any other project in that lab, except for the Human Genome Project. By this time, some of the people in the lab were working on mouse, some were working on rat, but they were not sequencing the entire mouse or rat genome, okay? So I put a lot of sequences in my database and was annotating and was, generating a lot of data. And I got to the point where I realized, okay, this bacterial genome is going to be about 3 megabases. So 3,000 base pairs, okay? And I got to that point and then realized, okay, I'm going to have about maybe 300 300 proteins. Okay. Well, initially I was told I was only going to annotate or, isolate or sequence about 10. Well, now I'm at 300.
Ooh.
Okay. And the database is growing. And so I don't know at what, is it going to go up to 4,000 base pairs but it really pretty much stayed around about 3,200 base pairs. Okay. So I got the project down to about 300 pieces. And the objective is to get one contig. Well, I had about 300 contigs. Okay. And so I'm still saying to Dr. Rowe, okay, is this enough? Is this enough? And his comment was, is it in one piece? And at this point, it's just like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to be here forever to get this in one piece.
And how many years had you been there at that point
When I started writing the dissertation, I had been there for about 6 years. Okay. Now, at this...
And 6 years is about average, or maybe 5.5 is about average nationally.
To finish your master's and your PhD.
Right.
Okay. At this point, the graduate dean stepped in at about 6.5 years and said, she is to walk. Okay?
Good.
Make sure you understand she is to walk. Well, telling a prima donna like Dr. Bruce Rowe instructions for a student was not viewed very favorably. Okay? But the graduate dean won out. So May of 2001, I walked.
And this was Lee Williams, the graduate dean?
I forget the name.
I think it was
okay.
Lee Williams. I know of him being a hero in standing up for other students as well.
Okay. So he blessed me by forcing Dr. Bruce Rowe to allow me to walk. And so it was all the pomp and circumstance of walking, and my husband got to hood me because he was a judge and he was a doctor of law. And so then he was able to hood me. And so that was a wonderful experience. But that happened May of 2001. I did not defend my dissertation until October of 2002.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Bruce Rowe would not read the dissertation. And the problem was that my project did not have a collaborator. Okay. Everyone else's project had a collaborator, meaning the collaborator had a time frame. We need the sequence at this time. We want to submit the paper at this time. My project didn't have a collaborator. It was an extension of Dr. Bruce Rowe's own graduate work. Okay. So he was interested in looking at the sequence of Bacillus thermophilus. But I mean, he wanted the total sequence. He wanted it in one piece. I actually, by the time I defended my dissertation, I got it down to 173 pieces. And it was going to take a miracle to get it down to one piece. Okay. Because it had a lot of ribosomal DNA that was not fitting together. And I mean, it was very interesting. Okay. But the entire time, from the time that I walked, well, before I walked, I was writing the dissertation, and I was, as I said, keeping notes on the materials and methods. Okay. And I was watching other people annotate their genome. So I had started annotating, and I was not totally there, but the big deal was for me to find in the library a model organism for Bacillus thermophilus, which was my bacterial genome. Okay, it was gram-positive, and I needed a gram-positive bacteria. So E. coli was not going to work. E. coli was gram-negative. So I needed in the library a book that was the annotation of Bacillus subtilis. Went to the library multiple times, I would say 20 times, looking for that book. Which then in 2002, I realized the book didn't exist because it was not finished until 2001. Okay. So in 2002, about February of 2002, I'm in the library. I've searched the stacks. I'm looking all over the place, and I just happened to stumble upon the 2 books, thick volumes of books that annotate Bacillus subtilis, which is my model organism for Bacillus stereothermophilus. And I thought heaven opened. I really did think heaven opened, because now I could fully annotate it.
Yes.
Okay. And so, I mean, I read both of those books and compared the metabolic pathways in those Bacillus subtilis to the metabolic pathways that I found in Bacillus stereothermophilus, and actually protein per protein. Okay. And there were some proteins missing in Bacillus stereothermophilus that were present in Bacillus subtilis. So, I mean, that was the big deal for my dissertation. You know, when you're comparing a model organism to a newly identified organism, which was a thermophile, it only grew at like 70 degrees. So, you know, it was really a big deal for me.
That's correct.
Okay. And so my dissertation, actually last week I printed it out. I have my dissertation very prominently displayed in my house.
I don't blame you.
Because it was a lot of work.
When you work hard for things, you're prouder of them typically.
Yeah, and you realize that you've got to be disciplined enough to finish the project.
Yeah.
I think other people would have just thrown up their hands and walked away.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you that. What was it that enabled you to persist? Can you name any one or two or three things?
I think watching Dr. Wayne Miles, my uncle, complete his PhD at Temple University, because I know how long it took him. And sometimes I saw the frustration in his face, but he just pursued it. Then in the lab, you know, I saw other students, you know, working hard and, you know, getting frustrated by the protocols and changing the protocols, and, you know, in order to get their the sequencers to read, you know, clean material and, you know, to be successful. So I watched other students' success. I watched them toil and work hard, but I never saw anybody work 8 years on a PhD. Okay?
Well, I know of other examples in which it's happened, you know, but those were usually examples in which there would be failures and they would have to start over. I mean, the project would just fail, and so they would have to start over.
My cousin was at Johns Hopkins working on her PhD in biology, and she had to change major professors like twice because they would resign. And then I just had a cousin finish her PhD at University of Delaware. And she had many setbacks because of professors leaving.
That happens,
Yes.
yeah. And so you had some role models in people who persisted, and this story that you're telling about your persisting, I'm hoping, will help other students who see this. It will encourage them to persist.
I think that when you identify an area where you have a passion, it's kind of like my son. He's so good with computers. And so when he was saying, oh, I'm going to be an accounting major, I was like, David, okay, you want to choose accounting, but David, do something with computers. Have a minor in computers.
Yeah.
Well, after a year of accounting, he realized, I'm not good in accounting. Let me stick with what I'm good with, you know, in computers. And then he just breezed through.
Yeah, and often you're good at what you love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, I have another question, though. So you've mentioned some challenges here. For example, getting full credit for the work that you do, and having things take longer than it seemed that they needed to. And so, what would you advise anyone else to do if they faced problems like that? I mean, what advice would you offer if someone else faced a similar problem?
If you are pursuing a terminal degree, such as a PhD or MD, or, you know, finishing dental school, you should say to yourself in the very beginning, there are going to be obstacles, okay? You need to say to yourself, am I prepared to deal with financial setbacks? Am I prepared to deal with commuting? Am I prepared to deal with the car breaking down on the road? Am I prepared to stay in the lab all night long? Am I prepared to stay up for about 3 days just trying to push things through? Am I prepared to study and also teach and also do research. Because if you then say to yourself, I don't have that commitment, then you, with all that talent, you've realized you've got talent, but do you have commitment? Okay? Because there are many people who have all the talent in the world. They are smart enough to be brain surgeons, but they refuse to put the energy in, the time in. Everybody's waiting on somebody to just, here's your PhD. Let me put it in your lap. Okay? And one of the comments that happened while I was pursuing my PhD, and this fight was going on between me and my major professor, my other professors got together, and at that point I realized that a PhD is a political degree, and I had no clue about that. That it's a political degree, and I'm thinking, what do you mean? It's a political degree. Well, I was informed this. I was sitting there. I was totally flabbergasted when I heard this. One of my mentors said to me, he said, "You seem to think that all of the research that you've done and your demonstrated teaching abilities constitute us giving you a PhD." And I thought to myself, I've worked for 6.5 years doing research. I've generated all this data. I've taught the classes. I was a teaching assistant. I am a research assistant. And so someone saying that they're giving me something was an insult, because I'm thinking to myself, do they know how much money I'm spending? Do they have a clue? I'm taking time away from my children. Do they know what I'm giving? I'm sacrificing. Okay. And I can actually say, the Army's mentality is, be the best you can be. And Nike is just do it. And I mean, I love in Vegas, in Caesar's Palace, they have a Nike store in the Forum shops. And if you go to the 3rd floor of the Nike store, there is a sign that says, you might beat me, but you'll bleed trying.
That's funny.
I love that saying, because the thought that somebody's beating you means that you are in the race. Okay? Now, if you decide you do not want to get in the race, then that's your decision. But you really have to say to yourself, I'm letting myself down. Okay? Now, if you get in that race, you've got to say to yourself, I'm going to run this race. I'm going to run this race with integrity. There will be no lies. Okay? There will be no shortcuts. I'm going to run this race to the very end. You're going to see that finish line, but that finish line may be 5 miles away. It may be 5 months away. You may start a dissertation writing it 2 years before you actually defend it. But you really have to say to yourself, I'm staying in this race. Okay? Regardless of the obstacles. And the obstacles will build your character. Now, there's something about when obstacles build your character versus people trying to build your character, especially when those people have less character than you have. Okay? I have a problem with that. Okay? So, and I will say this one thing. I had a major success when I was working on my master's, because in the biochem department, it was just known, okay, you're gonna fail that first time. Okay? Everybody fails that master's oral defense the first time. It was just known. Okay?
Wow.
And my time I was scheduled for like a Monday at 1 o'clock. Well, the guy that was scheduled at 9 o'clock, he failed it. Okay? And everybody was like patting him on the back. Hey, man, you got to expect it. Sharon, you're next. Look, Sharon, I went in and I said to myself, I'm going to give 100%. Now, I'm going to give 100%. And if I fail, I really don't know what else to do. Because if I'm giving 100%, as far as preparing this, as far as getting up, presenting it, if you then say to me, I failed, I just don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So I gave my 100%. They said, okay, Miss Lewis, step outside and we will let you know in a couple of minutes. And I stepped outside and I just sat there and I said, I gave 100%.
That's the best you can do.
That's it. So when I walked in and they shook my hand, I was thrilled. And then when I went back to the lab, they were like, Sharon, it happens to everybody. And I was like, I passed. And they were thrilled for me.
That's
I
great.
mean, it was just wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But if I were to tell other people trying to obtain a terminal degree, you've got to give 100%. There are no shortcuts. No one is going to hand you anything on a silver platter. And I come from a middle class background where a couple of things were handed to me. And that PhD was not.
Yeah, you have to earn it.
A
lot of people don't realize that. Yeah. But as far as not getting full credit for your work, would you advise students, like when they see that happening, would you advise them to go in and ask about it as soon as they see it happening? Or when it happened to you, did you just accept it and think, well, I'll work harder and next time I'll get my name on that paper?
Well, no, I went to the person who was in charge of the projects and said, because it happened twice. I went to those, both of them were men. And I approached them and said, hey, I isolated DNA in this project, or I did this, or I did that. How come my name is not on the paper? And they were like, well, your contribution was minimal. And I knew my contribution was not minimal. I don't do anything minimal.
Okay. And so at that point, you felt like there's not really a lot more that you can do. Or
Right.
did they publish an errata or anything?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because that is a possibility. And so on your dissertation, when it started taking longer, you said that the vice president or the graduate dean got involved. Did you go to him, or did he hear about it from your advisors? Or
Oh, that was an interesting process. And a certain professor told me, do not say anything. But I had a certain professor come to me and said, Sharon, you should have been gone a year ago. And he said, the amount of work you've done, the amount of teaching you've done, Sharon, this is not going to end well. And I was like, what would you advise me to do? And he told me, go to the graduate dean.
I think that is good advice.
Well,
There's a time that you really have to do it.
I went one step further. I wrote a letter to President David Boren. And the professor who advised me to go to the graduate dean later found out that I wrote a letter to President Boren. And the thing about it is, Lawton is a small community, and there's a gentleman by the name of Mr. Bentley. Mr. Bentley owned the newspapers in Lawton. Mr. Bentley was on the Board of Regents.
Oh, wow.
For OU. And so at the time that I wrote the letter to President Boren, I had already talked to Mr. Bentley. Okay, so President Boren had my letter, but then Mr. Bentley called. And so President Boren's chief of staff was then dispatched to go to the graduate dean and say, what's going on? And so I forever, when I see President Boren anywhere, I'm thinking to myself, that man does not realize how he helped me. He really has no clue.
It's amazing how sometimes people can make a difference with just the one action, and they can turn everything around.
Because it was obvious that the amount of work, as they said, you think that the amount of work that you've done and your demonstrated teaching abilities constitutes us giving you a PhD. If you're saying that to somebody, it's kind of like, and then they all kind of sat there, ha ha ha, and it was like, okay, gentlemen, you're not going to get the laugh last here, the laugh here. And so, you say to yourself, I should not have had to go to that extent. But after putting in that much work, that many years, that much money, that much sacrifice, I wasn't walking away.
Right.
And I've seen other people in that lab walk away.
Give it up.
Just say, I'm out.
I've seen that happen also. And I think that's one of the reasons, this sort of story, you're being willing to tell this sort of story, is what makes these videos very important, because if students hear and see stories like this, then they may not have similar experiences. They may not ever need to know that these things have happened before. But if it does happen to them, then they know it's not just them.
And don't give up.
Yes, and they have an example of what to do. And it's very important to listen to these stories and accumulate solutions, possible solutions, so that if something happens, they have a number of possible solutions that they can do, and they understand that this sort of thing, it is not unknown that these things do happen. And so I thank you very much.
My big just hallelujah was finding those 2 books on Bacillus subtilis in that library as many times as I was between those 2 aisles in that library, and then OU had purchased those 2 books.
That's wonderful.
That really was wonderful.
That is wonderful. And so then after you got your PhD, how long was it between then and your becoming a professor at Langston?
I was unemployed for 4 months, and I really needed that 4 months to get rid of the bitterness, to get some rest, to try to erase some things.
And did you live at Lawton during that time?
I was in Lawton, yes, and was spending time with the kids and my husband, and just not really reading, but just chilling out.
Yeah.
My chill out period. I went home to Philadelphia during that time, and family loved on me and everything, so that was wonderful. Yes.
I bet they were very proud.
Yes. But Uncle Wayne was the first person to get his PhD, and then Wendy got hers from Johns Hopkins, and so I was the 3rd person.
And who is Wendy?
Wendy Williams, Dr. Wendy Williams, and she's at University of Penn
and
right now.
And is she a cousin of yours?
A cousin, yes, a first cousin.
Okay.
And then I'm the 3rd person, and then the 4th person is my cousin Faith Miles, who just finished last year.
So one role model after another.
Yes,
then.
yes.
That's great.
Yes.
That's really great. And so then did you interview at many places, or did you sort of determine that you wanted to go to Langston? Or
the best interview that I had was in Boston. Okay, that was very interesting. They called me up. They said, we're going to fly you in, put you in a Marriott resort, and you will interview with 10 people. Now, in one day, between 8 and 5, you're interviewing with 10 people.
Wow.
And so that was kind of grueling. But their lab was just like Dr. Rowe's lab was well equipped. They were doing DNA sequencing. And so that was a wonderful experience. I did not get that job. It was just a pipe dream to just go and have the experience.
And what institution was this?
It was not at an institution. It was at a private company.
Oh, it was industry.
Yes.
Okay.
And the thing about it was, it wasn't realistic. Sharon, how were you going to move your family up to Boston when your husband's the primary breadwinner?
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't move. Or what was I going to do? Commute up to Boston? I mean, commuting to Norman is one thing. Commuting to Boston, back and forth to Boston, was another. But it was just the fun of the interview. Yeah. I mean, I felt special for even being considered. So that was interesting. Yes.
And so then you interviewed at Langston, and you received an offer from...
I was actually working at the Health Science Center.
Okay.
For 1 month, and then before Langston asked me to come interview. Okay. So I stayed at the Health Science Center, and then Langston was really serious about, are you going to take this job as a chemistry professor? And so the transition happened. Yes. And so in 2003, I started at Langston as an assistant professor. I got tenure in 2007.
Okay. And were you still commuting, or did you move then to Langston?
Oh, that was wonderful. Okay, for 2 years, from Lawton to Langston, that is a 2-hour commute. Okay,
you
one
drove
way.
It every day.
One way. Okay, and I did it every day. I think there was one snow day that I actually just stayed on the campus, but otherwise I commuted 2 hours to get to work, 2 hours to get back, and still was at my son's football games and my daughter's cheerleading. events, and so doing homework with them and everything. Okay.
So you were spread a little thin.
I was spread
perhaps.
a little bit thin, and so then my husband got promoted to the Court of Criminal Appeals in the Capitol, and he said we are not commuting, so we moved up to Edmond.
That's great. That's
Yes.
That must have seemed much closer.
Yes. So that was 35 miles from Langston.
Wow.
Yeah. And my children were not used to seeing me as much. And so it was an interesting transition because it was like, she's here all the time.
Who is this person?
So that was interesting. Yeah, we had a growing experience there. But, and we moved them at the wrong time because my daughter had just made the cheerleading team in 9th grade, and it was her world, and my son was on the football team, and so we moved them at the wrong time.
Oh.
Yeah, we really did. Yes. And so, I mean, we made up for it with them going to OU. So
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's great. And so then how were things at Langston? I mean, you've gotten tenure, so you've succeeded there. And
Having President Joanne Haysbert as president, she mentored me from afar. She did not pick me as a favorite or anything like that. But she would send a letter to my desk saying, okay, there's a meeting in San Francisco. And I would look at the letter and say, oh, okay, yeah, there's a meeting. I've got teaching responsibilities, and I'm doing research with OU and OU's Department of Engineering and this and that and the other. Well, then she would have someone hand deliver me that same letter. And so then I was like, oh, I think I need to consider this. Okay. So then her secretary would call me and say, did you make flight arrangements and
it's
hotel
nice
arrangements?
to feel wanted, isn't it?
And so she mentored me. She really did, from afar. Okay.
That's
and so
great.
that was very wonderful. President Haysbert was there for 6 years, and my shining moment was there were about 25 people applying for tenure and promotion at the time that I was. And I came into Faculty Institute that fall. Well, you apply in November, but you don't find out until you walk into Faculty Institute that fall. Okay, because the Board of Regents does not consider you for tenure until like the month of June. Okay.
Right.
And I don't think quite it's the Board of Regents. I think it's another board, higher education. But so I walked into the meeting, and I was just strolled into the meeting, sat wherever, and so then I'm sitting there, and I hear my vice president says, "Will Dr. Sharon Lewis come forward?" And I'm thinking, what did he say? And he said, "Will Dr. Sharon Lewis come forward?" And I went down, and I'm thinking, okay, there's 150 faculty in here. Oh goodness, what did I do? What is he going to say? And President Haysbert comes over with this envelope, and she said, of all the people that applied for promotion and tenure, or promotion or tenure, Dr. Lewis is the only one who got promoted and tenured.
Wow.
Okay, no one else got promoted, no one else got tenured.
What an honor.
I mean, it was just one of those special moments. It was just like finishing that master's thesis and them shaking my hand saying, okay, you're done.
That's
I mean,
nice.
after doing it just one time.
That's nice.
And so those kind of things, are special, but you've got so much research and teaching to do, you can't let it go to your head.
Yeah.
I mean, you've
Right.
got so much responsibility.
But it is nice to have those things.
It really is
happen.
special.
Yeah.
It really is. I would have dressed up if I knew that was going to happen.
Give me a hint next time.
Yeah, I really would have.
Well, that's great. So you're on the track you want to be on, obviously. And so where does your career go from here? What goals do you have, and what are you doing to pursue those? Or
Langston, being a historically black university and college, what happens is for me, I have a lot of collaborations. Okay, I've had 6 collaborations with the University of Oklahoma Department of Engineering.
Wow.
Okay, now I was a biochemist at OU.
That's wonderful.
But I now have an asphalt chemistry lab at Langston.
Great.
Okay, and so those projects are wearing down, and like 2 papers have been written, or 2 or 3. And actually, at October the 1st and through the 3rd, there is a conference in Brazil. And
wow.
some of the work that I did is on a paper that will be presented at that conference.
That's great.
So I've already
And your name's going on it, right?
My name is on it. And I've actually gone on Expedia and looked at the plane tickets and everything. So that's kind of interesting. So I've had those six sub-grants with the University of Oklahoma. I've had a 2-year collaboration with Carnegie Mellon University. I've had a 1-year collaboration with, the collaboration with Carnegie Mellon was with their Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center for me to develop a bioinformatics class at Langston University.
Wow.
So every fall I teach bioinformatics class. And, you know, I'm still in close contact with the people in Pittsburgh because, like, as they change things, they update me and then I change the class. And so it's just a wonderful experience.
Perfect.
When I need them to come down to teach something, they do it. Okay.
That's great.
And I've gone to Pittsburgh like 3 different times for 2 weeks at a time in order to learn more and more. Okay. As far as annotating genomes and bioinformatics. Okay. So, University of Oklahoma, Department of Engineering collaboration, Carnegie Mellon collaboration, University of Michigan Medical School collaboration, because we were looking at the genes implicated in susceptibility to bipolar disorder. Okay.
Wow.
And I actually wrote a paper with one of my students one of the students that was doing research with me on the C-catechol methyltransferase gene and its impact on bipolar disorder. Okay. Now, before I wrote that paper, after I wrote that paper, that's when I established the collaboration with the University of Michigan Medical School. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to establish, for the last year, I've been trying to establish a relationship with Indiana University Medical School. They've got quite a few people dealing with bipolar disorder. And one of their medical doctors there, and I have really been in touch with his name is Dr. Paul Edwards. And we've really been trying to get this collaboration going.
Wow.
But I've had collaborations with Jackson State, which is also an HBCU.
Yes.
And North Carolina Central University. We've all worked together and generated a paper. Okay. And that was fun. But we all got together because we submitted a white paper to the University of Michigan Medical School. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I learned how to use Cytoscape, which is a bioinformatics tool from the University of Michigan Medical School. Okay, so that was my big deal. What I wanted from them was to learn how to use Cytoscape. And they then dedicated one of their visiting professors to me every Friday for an hour. He worked with me.
That's great.
As far as using Cytoscape and learning the tools that University of Michigan's Medical School's bioinformatics department has generated, those tools.
Yeah.
And so then I've had collaboration, of course, with the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation that is at Oklahoma State University. Mm-hmm. And then at the OU Health Science Center, I have a collaboration with Dr. Darren Akins because they give $30,000, $40,000 worth of money to Langston's biology and chemistry department for us to continue biomedical research. Mm-hmm. And so I just received the letter from Dr. Akins telling me this year is $30,000 and, okay, Sharon, how are you going to spend it? And my response was, I need to buy more computers for my bioinformatics class.
Yeah.
And so, updated computers. Previously, like 5 years ago, they gave me money for computers. Okay. So I love the OU Health Science Center, and especially that inbred program that they have, because they're so generous in giving. And so where I am right now, as far as what I want to do next, is I've had all these collaborations. Langston is not an R01 university,
right.
like Tulsa University or Oklahoma State University or the University of Oklahoma, in that we don't get the big grants from NIH or NSF. Mm-hmm. But I want an R01 grant.
Sure.
Whether it's in asphalt chemistry or bipolar disorder or bioinformatics.
Right.
Okay, those are my 3 areas of interest. And, I am a grant writing sister at this point, or a proposal writing sister at this point. And so, that's my objective. Also, I've written a paper that I want published in a psychiatric magazine. And so I've approached 2 magazines. They've declined the publication, but I'm going to keep going until that 9-page paper is published. And so my objective for this school year is to write other papers on research that I've generated, but then also to establish other collaborations, especially this one at Indiana University Medical School, and then also to write a proposal or 2 that, are RO1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're certainly working in some hot areas,
Yes.
and it's quite obvious that you have your goals outlined,
Yes,
which I think, in a way, makes you a wonderful role model.
Thank
And I
you.
was just wondering, do you have any wild idea about how many students you've impacted over the years up at Langston? Any guess?
I've had students in my bioinformatics class, and although we only meet twice a week, we're interacting, seriously, because at the end of the class, they have to do a presentation. And so, they have to take time. If they don't get it in class, they have to come spend time during my office hours, and we have to sit there one-on-one and let's get this squared away, as far as getting on the computer and searching the websites. And, like I allowed them to choose their own disease. I allow them to choose whichever gene that they want, and then we will work that. Okay. Now, if at any point we're using the databases and we're not able to generate a protein structure for that gene, we got to start all over. And when I have to tell them they have to start all over, oh gosh, it's so special. It's not good for them. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, how many students have I impacted? I would say maybe 25. But also, I have a collaboration with the Academy of Applied Science, in which it's called the Research and Engineering Apprenticeship Program. And so I would have high school students come do research in my lab for 1 month during the summer. Okay. So I think maybe 25 undergraduates and maybe 10 high school students.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, it was so nice to hear your story. Believe me, this is going to be very, very valuable.
Thank you very much.
Hearing things like this enables students not to be blindsided. I think it gives them a really good education. Is there anything else that you would be interested to add? Any final message?
My final message to the students is that you find your passion. You're going to be talented in any area, okay? You're going to be a treasure in any area, okay, that you pursue. But find that little niche that just excites you, okay? Excites you. And no matter how hard it is, if you choose to be a brain surgeon, you need to talk to Dr. Ben Carson, write him, read his book, okay? If you choose to be a mathematician, find the mathematician that is the number 1 person. If you choose to be a painter, okay, you need to go to the Sistine Chapel and look at the work of Michelangelo. And so you've got to decide where your passion is, and you've got to pursue it. Whatever obstacles are in your way, these obstacles can move, okay? And finding role models will help you along the way. But if you're all out there by yourself, it's okay, because then others will look to you as a mentor, okay? And those would be my closing remarks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So wonderful. I really valued this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's been a great honor.
Thank you.
And thank you, all of you.